My name is Cameron Dadd, and this is my report for CIU 111.3 titled The Unmitigated Disaster, an analysis of state and federal policy with regards to Australia's creative industries. This report is a researched reflection upon information provided by the Creative Industries Statistical Analysis for Western Australia, 2013 edition, and the ramifications of that analysis when viewed in the context of certain state and federal level policies. I will endeavour to explain my findings and my conclusions and suggest potential solutions to the problems found therein. The statistical analysis shows a breakdown of industry growth within WA, Western Australia, specifically focusing on the creative industries, using data gleaned from 5 years of census information from 2006 to 2011. However, first it presents the categories or segments that collectively make up the creative industries: publishing, music, visual and performing arts, film, TV and radio, architecture and design, advertising and marketing, and software and digital content. Before further grouping these into two distinct categories, creative services and cultural production. To quote the document, creative services, enterprises, and creative entrepreneurs provide inputs that are central to businesses across many industries, from manufacturing and construction to retailing and entertainment, representing what is, in effect, a creative services economy. Creative enterprises add value to production through design, technical performance, packaging, and branding. The cultural production segments, on the other hand, include film, TV and radio, music, visual and performing arts, and publishing. These sectors embody the role of arts and cultural assets as contributors to quality of life and community well-being, and as important contributors to economic activity and economic development in their own right. Further to this, the analysis also introduces the creative trident, which is a further breakdown of industry professionals by separation into the following categories: specialists, creative industry professionals working within the creative industry; embedded, that is, creative industry professionals working within another non-creative industry, such as marketing staff within a mining company; and support staff, those occupations that exist within creative industries that are logistic and strategic, such as management, human resources, that kind of thing. Figure 2 here might look a little bit misleading, but the essential numbers to take away are 41,317 people in total are actually employed in creative industries or in occupations that somehow relate to the creative industries. Figure 4 shows the proportion of the workforce, in this case in Australia, states and territories, that are currently employed within creative industries. The analysis goes into further detail and further breakdowns of the numbers, both embedded and exclusive of embedded creative workers within the industry. But the really important information in regards to this analysis starts at figure 15. This graph shows the average annual growth in creative employment by state and territory from 2006 to 2011. You'll note there that the total workforce and creative employment percentiles are both pretty much exactly the same, 3.2% for WA. Now, note here it's kind of pointed out as the highest rate of creative employment apart from Victoria, excuse me. So probably you'd think that this would be a good thing, but it's not. What this means is, on average, in the 5 years of census data provided, there has been no growth, except through workforce growth, in WA's creative industries employment, which means proportionately this is zero effective growth within WA's creative industries. Figure 16 here shows the average annual growth with averaging means. As you can see, the total workforce increased by 3.2%, so really the actual increase itself was only through population growth. And figure 17 here shows the proportion between creative services and cultural production increase. That's still important. Keep that in mind. So I'm guessing why you're wondering why I'm pointing this out as it being a negative. Surely growth of some description is a good thing. In this case, proportional growth like this usually is a good indicator of stagnation of an industry. Whether negative or positive, the other states are actually showing change within the makeup of their workforce over that 5-year period. Change is good. Fluctuation in workforce percentages is a sign of a dynamic local economy. It also means that there's more demand and employment opportunities. So with those thoughts in mind, please note here on figure 18 that we have an average annual growth, which is the only positive mention in all fields. Now that we know that that's actually just population growth, this doesn't look all that useful. Figure 21 and the following graphs are actually really good at pointing out just how difficult this is. You'll notice that the segments that are related to animation, the course I'm taking now, are actually not anywhere near the expanding point. Again, animation is multidisciplinary. Potentially I could move into several different areas. Again, I could move into multimedia production and software development, except that the only real expansion there seems to be away from animation that I'm really involved in. Then on to figure 24, where you can see that I suppose the services that are expanding would be considered to be marketing services, which I could potentially have an in. However, usually I would be looking at advertising as specifically an animation area. Figure 25 is especially heartbreaking if you look at it. Seed or transitioning is not a good place to be if you're in any kind of film or TV network system. And the fact that pretty much there's no change for any of these industries that I would like to really work in here in Perth, here in WA, is a bit upsetting. Okay, so obviously this is important to me because a stagnant workforce and a lack of industry growth means less opportunity for me to get any kind of employment. I could just move to Melbourne, which is what I intended to do anyway, but that's where the jobs are. But that's not a solution to the overall issue of the industry stagnation in WA. Moreover, there's a lot of really large factors that also impact on my industry, regardless of which state I'm in. This is a report that was published on the 15th of May 2015, and it's the former chair of the Australia Council talking about how disastrous the budget cuts have been towards the Australia Council, and apart from the rather underhanded way that it was all dealt with, please look at the grab line here. Fear's ministry could become more powerful than council. The reason for that is that, one, there was no consultation about this. They were literally warned at the last possible second that this was going to happen, and on top of that, the Arts Ministry isn't an independent statutory authority. Quoting directly here from another ex-chair member, Hilary McPhee, statutory authorities, as you know, have to be able to work with both sides of politics, whereas a program within the ministry has to work for the government of the day, and that's not the way to run arts funding. The lack of independent statutory authority means that the funding for creative industry startups, and especially cultural production, is subject to approval by the ministry, without oversight. And considering the government of the day is already rather conservative, that further restricts the creative industries within Australia. A little bit of background information. The Australia Council for the Arts is the Australian government's arts funding and advisory body. This next image actually shows you which council grant programs and government programs for funding are actually delivered by the Australia Council now. I feel it's important to mention the statement from Australia Council in regards to the revised budget as well. The board and executive have carefully considered how we can provide the most effective support to Australian artists and arts organisations within the framework of the Council's legislative functions and strategic plan goals. The revised funding model has been developed in response to the budget measures, with the intention of providing support for the arts which is complementary to the National Programme for Excellence in the Arts. The Council will continue to deliver a grants program for individuals, groups and small to medium-sized organisations, with assessment by a national pool of expert peers. The Council plans to ingest $12 million over the two core grants rounds in 2015 to 2016. This reflects a reduction in the number of rounds being offered and will also include some changes to eligibility criteria. So the Australia Council had its funding diverted. So if that's the case and the eligibility criteria change and everything is so awful, let's think about the Arts Ministry. The following is the eligibility for a grant from Screen Australia, which essentially points out that unless a production is suitably Australian, there's no real possibility of receiving any sort of government support for startup production companies or post-production facilities in Australia, let alone WA. And it gets worse from there. So this is the Federal Government Ministry for the Arts Creative Industries webpage. You'll note the Creative Industries Development and the Strategic Digital Industry Plan, Creative Industries Innovation Centre, and a host of other little projects that they've got going. Firstly, that Strategic Digital Industry Plan, that's from the Labor government. It was dated 2011. The ministry signature on that one is Simon Crean. And as we know, they've since cut the budget drastically. So essentially, all of the information that's contained within that digital industry plan is the Labour government's original plan and has absolutely no relation to the policy for the Ministry of Arts at this time. But they've left it up there. That suggests to me that they don't have any real interest in updating any of their resources about the potential for there being grants available for the creative industries in this region. And just to make sure that this wasn't some kind of mistake, the Creative Industries Innovation Centre. In February 2009, the 17 million Creative Industries Innovation Centre was launched, again by the previous government. The National Centre is hosted by the University of Technology Sydney and will provide emerging creative businesses across the country with access to a world-class business advisory and development network. When you click on that link, go to a 404 webpage. I am now posting up the news document that points out that the Creative Industries Innovation Centre closed April 2015, which follows on nicely to the next piece of information. This is from kotaku.com.au. 2K Australia closed down practically the next day. And I'd also like to point out that one of the reported reasons why they closed is costs of operating out of Australia were apparently to blame for the decision. I can also somewhat corroborate evidence of production costs here in Australia being much higher than other places. The owner of the backlot, WA, has actually pointed out that it's almost 3 times the production costs elsewhere to film and to do post-production here in WA. In case you were hoping that Screen WA or potentially WA's Creative Industries Arts Department was any better, according to their Creative Industries document, the only things they're interested in funding at this time is contemporary music and designer fashion. Incidentally, Screen West's Documentary and Television Development Fund, the eligibility formats include factual programs and scripted drama/comedy series. Clearly, the creative industries mean so much to these people. But how do we fix this problem? How do we fix these problems if potentially WA or further afield? One of the ways is private investment, or in point of fact, more private investment. More people like Backlot, SAE, pushing for more involvement in the creative industries within WA. More corporate investment, maybe more investment from mining sector companies. Potentially fixing the grant system so that it's not quite so restrictive and awful. Potentially adopting another country's industry plan. This is Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Their strategy involved offering huge tax breaks for productions within Ontario, as well as subsidy for CI startups and established companies willing to work within the state, as well as creating a media corporation designed to coordinate with the CI companies within. This means that there's an authority in place that can better judge the viability of a venture within the state, without political oversight, and with a vested interest in actually generating money. Considering that the state of Ontario has reported $1.23 billion in revenue raised with production companies in place, which is apparently the 4th year running that they've reached over the 1 billion mark. Potentially Western Australia could adopt a similar method, and from the looks of it, it's been highly lucrative for Ontario. It's being used for more North American sets at the moment than pretty much anywhere in Hollywood. But essentially, right now, WA's creative industries are isolated and stagnant. There are multiple factors that have led to this state of affairs, and the truth is, unless extremely drastic measures are undertaken on a federal and state level, the career paths of most creatives, including myself, will lead us overseas, to countries that actually understand the economic benefits of a healthy and happy creative sector.